everyone. Yesterday in my Conscious Baby community call, we had some wonderful conversation around thinking about how you were raised and how that relates to your reactions, responses as a parent, your parenting. I'm sure this is something many of you have already thought about, but there are often some really interesting links. So I wanted to share that with you guys and invite you into the conversation because it can be eye-opening and really helpful at the same time. Because I think sometimes as a parent, when you parenting kids can get stuck in reactions, responses to your kids, you feel frustrated, and when you're in that limbic system emotional moment, it can be really hard to get unstuck from it or to jump out and have perspective at the same time. So I hope this will give you some insight and some tools even to be able to navigate those situations. Okay, so the first thing is to think about and notice, and also, by the way, no judgment in this, so try and think about your responses from curiosity and interest and healing. Okay, so first think about your responses, reactions to your children. What triggers you when they cry or they have big feelings or behaviors? So it might be your baby. It might be a baby. When your baby cries, is that triggering in some way for you? Well, all innately moms you'll have that hormonal connection. Is my baby okay? But so I more mean around, does it make you especially angry or anxious, or does it trigger memories? Does it trigger a big reaction for you? Or your toddler tantruming, is that a trigger for you, an emotional trigger, or does it feel charged for you? More so than, oh, what's going on with my child? Or is it more something around behavior? It could be tantruming. Is it your child saying no to you? Just think about, do you have anything in particular that's triggering for you, or responses or reactions you feel like just come out of you that you rather they didn't, or you think about later and you're like, oh, wish I'd handled that differently. We all have those moments. And then also think about, if you're already familiar with aware parenting and the need for cry release and kind of the deeper meanings behind continued crying and tantruming, if you're already familiar with that, think back to how you felt before you learned about aware parenting or the emotional response, or before you started working with the cry release. Before then, what was it like for you? So it may also not necessarily be something that's super triggering, but just what was your response when your baby cried? Or was it immediately uncomfortable, or maybe still is? Or were you okay with it starting and then you reached a point, it was okay to a certain point? So think about that realm of your responses and reactions. That's the first thing. Okay, so the second thing after that, so kind of set that aside for a moment. The second thing is, think back to how you were raised. So in particular, when you cried or had big feelings, how were you responded to? What were the messages you got around emotions? What was the emotional atmosphere in your home growing up? With more, was it more the feeling, oh, feelings are scary, I don't know what to do with them, response that you got, or in your household? Or was it more, oh no, we don't talk about feelings, done? Or whatever else it was. Think about that. What memories do you have? Whether it's specific memories of something that happened or something you were told, or it could be implicit memory or something more felt, like you can't really name or explain the memory, it's just the sense you have. Um, yeah, what was the emotional climate? What? How were you responded to? Were you sent away to your room to have big feelings, or were they welcomed? Or maybe the crying was actually allowed, or even welcomed. Maybe you were held space for, or maybe yes, there were feelings, but they weren't necessarily handled well, or maybe you were laughed at. Just think about that part. Okay, that's the second part. That's something you may immediately know, have a sense of that, or that's something that may bubble up and come to mind the more you think about this. Okay, the third part, this is where things can get really interesting, but it's also exactly where it can seem vague and like you can't put your finger on it and maybe confusing. So this is about links. How do your past experiences, are there any links you can see? Excuse me one moment. Are there any links you can see between responses you got as a child and how you respond to your children? Excuse me. So it may not be direct, like it may not be an exact copy of how you were responded to, or it might be. So sometimes if there is a pacifier or nursing for crying, if 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 a parent is using nursing for upset, sometimes you'll find that that parent or you may have also been nursed. So sometimes it's the same response, but it might also be, if it was an aggressive response, you might have a counter response. Oh, I don't want to do that. But then there might also be something in particular, something like, in the past, if there was something your excuse me, this happens to me in the morning. If there was something specific that your parents, one parent or the other, or both, were not comfortable with, something they thought about you, they thought that crying was unacceptable, or they thought that you were misbehaving when you cried. Is there something that links up to your response to, in particularly when your child, quote, misbehaves? Is that what's triggering for you? So I hope that's clear. I want to think of an example, but I want to also respect confidentiality. Let's see. Sometimes there's something around safety that comes up. So when you were a baby or a child, and this may not have been conscious, but if feelings were not allowed or accepted, you may have felt unsafe. Your emotional environment may have felt unsafe. You may have been safe physically, but emotionally, it may have felt unsafe. Sometimes, as a parent with your child, your response to your child crying might be, oh no, don't cry. And you may not be able to put your finger on why, but sometimes that feeling, oh no, don't cry, is coming from or is related, excuse me, to your feeling as a child feeling unsafe. So sometimes what happens is if it felt unsafe for you, for a parent, that parent doesn't want their child to feel unsafe. So then the response is, oh no, don't cry. Whereas subconsciously, the message is, don't cry, it's not safe to cry. But it's a twist, if that makes sense. It's not don't cry because this environment is unsafe. It's a twist from don't cry because that's the message you may have learned, that it felt unsafe, so you don't want your child to feel unsafe. There are all kinds of ways these links happen. It can be direct or indirect. It can be like a spiral. But usually there's some kind of link. So whatever your reaction, or if there's something that triggers you, or your response, your initial feeling to your child, look for, is it a certain behavior, and is that a behavior that you did and that you got a certain response to, or is it something that your parents prohibited, or is there a certain clinginess that your child shows, and does that somehow relate to some experience you've had with your parents, or that your parents felt they couldn't let you go, or that they didn't spend time with you? Usually you'll find some kind of link, and it can sneak up on you. Sometimes it's really obvious, and sometimes it's really just like, wow, never saw that, but it's like an inversion. So think about that. And this is something sometimes takes an outside perspective to kind of help sort through if it feels like you get stuck. But this is a spot that that I find parents can get stuck, because it's not always clear. And that's why the reason why it's not always clear is because it's emotional. These emotional things go into us. These patterns go into us so early and so subconsciously. So it just becomes, it can feel like our nature to some degree, or it can feel like instinct when it's really a learned habit. And sometimes it just feels big and vague and you can't put your finger on it. But that's exactly why we do this work, why it's so important to do this work now, and with your babies and toddlers and children, so that you can start working through it and helping them work through and release and express and be safe with their emotions. But okay, so that's part 3. Part 4, the last part, is, so now that you've thought through this, and this might be something that you think about for a while, what do you do with the information? First thing is that when you can find some of these links, you can get some more perspective. And I find that whatever it was that felt big or vague or confusing or stuck in a habit starts to become a little more containable, starts to have some edges around it versus just this cloud that hangs. It can start to be definable. It doesn't necessarily mean it will become easier, although it can, but that part still takes some work, getting comfortable with the cry release or figuring out how you want to shift things. But it really can start helping the big cloud, the nebulous cloud, start becoming more frameable or containable, having perspective. And then that I find helps parents, can really help you when you're in the moment, when you're in a cry is happening, or your child is doing something that's triggering you. When you're in that moment, that's going to probably be more emotional reaction for you, whatever it is. Sometimes if you can just have the thought, if you can just access the thought, if you've already thought through it ahead of time, because this is higher brain reasoning, analyzing. Your emotional response is a lower brain limbic system response. When you're in that limbic system response, if you can add in, if you can recall, okay, some of what I'm feeling right now is my own response to my past, or it's left over. This relates to me, my past. That can help you start separating out, okay, that's me. This is my child right now. There's some different feelings going on. And then that process can then help you be more present with your child in the moment, or help you shift a response if that's something you're trying to do, or give you some perspective and start just clarifying things. And also just gives you new ways to use your past, that information about your past, usefully, ways to use it to inform your present responses in a deeper way than just, oh yeah, that's what my parents did and I want to keep doing it, or that's what my parents did and I definitely don't want to do that. In a more intrinsic way where you can really get down underneath and see the links, and then really see, oh, that's why this is happening this way. Okay, so that's some food for thought. I hope that's helpful. Nice to see you guys on here. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you in the group. Bye.